Hi everyone, it's me, and before we get into the actual content of this of the video that I'm presenting to you today, I just want to say a few things before we get started. Well, the first thing is, of course, that you've noticed that I've been posting, well, not a lot, but in the past few days, weeks, like these two review videos, and the thing is, I'm going to have a lot more of these videos coming, like where it's just me in front of this camera. There are several reasons for this. Well, first of all, because they're easier to produce. Just me in front of a camera talking is much easier for me to do than the usual stuff I do with my clip shows and all that. And second of all, because I don't have the time anymore, really, to do the videos that I usually do, because there are a lot of other personal things going on in my life, and because I have so much other stuff that I'm working on at the moment. So for the next few months, perhaps, maybe, unless there's something really important that I want to get out, like for example the upcoming Christmas special, I'll release a little trailer for that in a few days. It's just going to be me in front of the camera, just saying my piece, and well, I hope you're okay with that. So you're not gonna, now I'm just repeating myself, you're not gonna get any larger videos or series like my Tower of Babel series or something like that. So yeah, just I hope you still like them. I hope you don't think that, oh, now he's gone cheap and he's just mugging for the camera or something like that. It's really not that like that. It's just that, as I've said, I've got other things going on. I've got other projects I'm working on aside from YouTube, and yeah, that's essentially you're gonna get more videos like this. I mean, hey, you're not here to listen about me babbling why I do these sort of videos now. You're here because you want to hear me talk about my old childhood Bible, tearing into my old childhood Bible, the one I had as a kid. And so without further ado, you see, got it right here. So let's get started. First of all, I do have to sort of point out what I find kind of interesting about this is that this, even though this book has a lot of stuff cut out, like it's a children's book, of course they're not going to actually put in any real content. It's just like a good feel good version of the Bible. But I like the fact that even though this is essentially the abridged version, it's still, as you can see, it's still only a minute bit thinner than this one, which is the full thing, which contains like all the horrible shit in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and all that stuff. So I do kind of like that. And I guess the reason why that is because in this version, the pages, they're like only a few of, I don't know, micrometers, whatever's lower than millimeters. I don't know about that. They're only a few micrometers thicker than the pages in this one. So yeah, I kind of like I do like the fact that this, even though this is the abridged version, it's only a minute bit thinner than this one. Now, as you see, this is of course a German version of the Bible, but there is, I think this is a German translation of it. It says that there's apparently an English version of it. I haven't gotten I didn't go online yet to actually check what the original version looks like. But well, first of all, I do want to say something about this about this cover. And maybe it's just me being mean or something, but I don't know. I kind of get the feeling that whoever drew this kind of plagiarized it, maybe, because I went online looking for pictures of the crucifixion, and there's there's a picture of the crucifixion by Albrecht Altdorfer that shows the crucifixion from exactly this camera angle, or I guess viewpoint in this case. So it's kind of, I'm not really sure what to say about this, whether it's actually plagiarized in this sense, or whether it's really just a sort of case like The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Even though it is an American remake, it's still based off a book, so you're not really quite sure whether to classify it as like a cheap American remake or if it's just an American retelling of the Swedish book. So I'm really not so sure what to think about this one. And this picture comes up later in the book again, and I'll say something about that again. But, well, this was the front cover. And of course, this thing does have a back cover. Now, about the front cover, I said that maybe it might be plagiarized. This thing is obviously plagiarized. It's obviously just whoever drew this. It's just, you can definitely tell that it's just a cheap, it's a cheap knockoff. It's a cheap knockoff of Peter Bruegel's, I think that's his name, picture of the Tower of Babel. Like, you can clearly see it. It's the same tower design. And of course this, in the back, you have this sort of preamble or epilogue. No, prologue. And I just have to see what it says for a moment. See? Yeah. Basically, in this, here we have the first problem with this Bible. In the prologue, it says something to the effect of this version of the Bible is essentially suited for or adapted for younger audience, in the sense that the way it's written, the way it's built up, it's suited for a younger or modern audience. And the problem is, I mean, if there is actually an English, this doesn't make any sense in at least in this German version. If there is an English version of this, I guess how it kind of would make sense, considering that the KJV is kind of hard to read even for native English speakers. And I guess that even, yeah, I guess if teens, if high school kids, if grade school kids have a problem with Shakespearean English, they're definitely going to have a problem with reading the KJV. And I could see how you would make something like this, like a sort of modern day version, like sort of essentially an abridged version of like all the new international or modern English, whatever kind of Bibles that have come out since then. But the thing is, in the German version, in this German version, it doesn't make any sense, because you see, as a German native speaker, or if your German is good enough to the point where you're at least if you have a German, if you're writing like a German test, if you're in college and you take German as a class or something, or as an elective in high school, and you write a test, if you're at least in the B mark department. Or like I said, if you're a German native speaker, you can read through much of the original 1535-34 Luther Bible written in 16th century German with relatively little difficulty. Yes, of course, in the 16th century German version, there are a few words that are kind of off that we don't use anymore in modern German language. And at times, the grammar is kind of off. There are certain ways of saying things that we wouldn't say in modern German anymore, or hell, for that matter, even 19th century German. And I guess how it would make, it doesn't make any sense here, because as a German native speaker, if you can read the original 16th century Luther Bible, and you don't need a guide to understand this, then there's no point in trying to make, or at least if you're reading this as like a 16-year-old and not like maybe as a 10-year-old, there's no point in really modernizing the Bible in this case, even though ironically the one I just showed, even this version is in modern German, even though to me it makes no goddamn sense. And you could get through the original 16th century version just fine. And now I'm just repeating myself here. And the other thing I wanted to say about this prologue is at one point it makes the wait a second, I just gotta look at this for a moment, what it was. Yeah, it says something about this being like modern, like again, a modern version of this. And yeah, what I forgot to say in the very opening, this thing, like here, this German thing, was published in 1968. The apparent English version was published in 1963. So I kind of love how in here it says like modern, but of course, I guess back then it was modern. Nowadays, it's really dated. And later on, I'm actually going to show you why. And it's actually really funny to look at this, look at some of these pages from today's standpoint, or hell, even from like a 90s standpoint. Yeah, well, we're just, like I said, this is the prologue, just what I thought of the prologue. And, well, now we're going to actually take a look at this thing. So, well, indulge me in this. Now, here you see the first few pages, what we get right at the beginning. And I don't know what it is, but I kind of like the way they did this. I always like books that have this sort of picture kind of thing in it. It's sort of, I guess in this case, it's supposed to maybe get you primed for what you're about to read. However, again, there are some things that are just a tad bit, maybe not dated, but kind of weird. Like, for example, here, you see the whale. It's supposed to be like Jonah, the whale of Jonah, but if you look at it, it's got a back fin, but it doesn't have any side fins or something. It's kind of funny to look at. And here you can clearly see it. Again, it's Peter Bruegel's Tower of Babel. They ripped that off again. And yeah, like I said, I do kind of like this sort of way of making books. I don't know why. It's just a personal preference. And yeah, well, that's basically that. So here we basically have the first chapter. It's essentially the first part of Genesis, and in the beginning, well, at first yeah, that's a good way to start this. First of all, I have to give this thing a tiny bit of compliment in that the way it's structured is that you don't actually have any verses and chapters in this sense. Like, there are no numbers, there's no nothing to it. And I like it because it does sort of give this book the sense of maybe like a coherent narrative. Like you're actually reading this through like a real sort of novel kind of thing, where you don't get this feeling of when you're reading the actual Bible, okay, this is step 1, step 2, step 3, and so on and so forth. That you actually do get sort of a coherent, it's a more fluent way of reading, kind of like the Popol Vuh, even though that's a much better book with a much more satisfying ending. Yeah, I do kind of like it that they did it that way. And I guess again for younger readers, it's a bit easier to follow. It's a bit easier to read. But, well, again, it's what I said about what was it, Eclipse, in my Starting Games review. Eclipse, there's still something you can salvage, but it's still Stephenie Meyer. You can't save it. It's the same thing with this. Even though it has no chapters. It does have, it does have chapters, but it has no verses. There are no numberings and all that stuff. And even though they do sort of cut out, they do, as I said, they cut out a lot of the bad stuff, but they do also cut out a lot of pointless stuff. I have to give them credit for that. There's a lot of boring shit in the original Bible that they cut out, which is kind of satisfying. But again, it's the Bible. It's still poorly written. It's still poorly assembled. You know, on a certain level, you still can't save it. And, well, that's just what I thought about the way the whole thing is written. And the reason I bring this up right at the beginning here is because I do want to focus more on the illustrations in this, rather than the actual content of or at least the content of the writing. So that's just what I wanted to say right in the beginning. Sort of one of the few things I actually give them credit for. And, well, like I said, now this was the writing part, and now we're just going to get into the drawings, the illustrations. Okay, now here we have, as you can see, the story of Noah and his ark. A delightful tale that makes no goddamn sense if you actually look at this through an adult perspective. But the thing that I always noticed in all of these drawings, it's in all of them, and I'm going to get a little bit, I'm going to explain a little bit more about this as we progress, is the fact that you can even here, even with this Noah's Ark, you kind of can get the influence of the time. And I do sort of like it. I sort of like that. It's sort of an ironic kind of thing that, even though this Bible obviously was written with the intention of getting younger readers interested in scripture, interested in religion, and all that, it's sort of making like an ironic point in that you can see the fact that you can see where they get their inspiration from is sort of an ironic, making the ironic point that religion or gods, like in general, they're always they're always a product of the people and their culture. Sort of that they're sort of ironically or unintentionally making this point. And yeah, I guess in this case, in the case of Noah's Ark, and I think you just sort of get the feeling that they drew inspiration from that one of those long ass Bible movies. I think it's called Genesis or something. It was called In the Beginning, I think it is. And it sort of looks like your stereotypical ark, and all that. And I do sort of like it, like here, where you can see it. They sort of show how they built the ark, and it's like this set piece kind of way of building, like they used to build timber framing houses. And you just know with this sort of way of doing things, if this thing is out in the open water in a really heavy duty storm, this thing is going to get crushed. This thing's going to get torn to fucking pieces. Now here we have the thing that I already talked about right in the beginning, is here, no, not here, the Tower of Babel. And of course, yes. Yeah. This is just shamelessly ripping off something. Like, it sort of makes me think that this thing was made, that of course, I guess the illustrations weren't made in chronological order. So maybe it's like they drew all the other stuff, which is actually unique, with the exception of perhaps the crucifixion scene I showed earlier. And that at some point, the artist kind of got bored, kind of got tired, and thought to himself, you know what, screw this. I'm just gonna rip this off. It's a familiar sight, it's a familiar painting. I'm just gonna rip off Peter Bruegel in this. And it's like, you know, like, it's, again, this Bible is for kids. It's not like they're gonna know. That's kind of like offensive maybe, talking down to children's intelligence. But it's so humorous, again, like, it's humorous, but yeah, like what I just said, it's sort of like thinking like, okay, the kids probably aren't gonna notice this, and we can put that in there. You know, that children are stupid, they're not gonna do their homework anyway. It's kind of, I don't know. That's just what I wanted to say about this, this piece of artistry right here. So we're gonna jump away. Whoa, look at this thick piece of pages I'm gonna jump to. Yeah. Okay, now, here, this is supposed to be illustrations from the story of, David? David, I think it is. Jacob? David? Whatever. The dude that gets sent into slavery and then goes to Egypt. And what I like about this is really the first instance where you can see where they drew their inspiration from, like this face right here. Like I already said, it's this book, this German version, is from the 1960s. And of course, back then, you have to remember what kind of movies came out back then, in the late 50s, early to mid 60s. Of course, you had Ben-Hur, you had Cleopatra, you had the Ten Commandments, the In the Beginning movie, the one that I've already mentioned. And it seems to me, and this is the theme that goes throughout this Bible, throughout these illustrations, it sort of seems to me that they took a lot, and I mean a whole lot of inspiration from these movies. Like you can clearly see like this column and all that. The monumental kind of way of doing it. Yes, all of these drawings, all of these illustrations have this monumental theme to it, and I'm going to get to that in next two, I think it's the next two drawings. Yeah, what I also like about this, if you look closely here, here, you can see some sort of glyphs or carvings or something, and this is something that I've also noticed is the fact of how our scientific understanding of the world back then was. Like, you can see these drawings or something, they're just carved in, they're not actually painted. And nowadays we know that, for example, Rome, all the reliefs in Rome and in ancient Greece and all that, all the statues, most of them were painted. And the fact that we now, like the Renaissance sculptures and all that stuff, that's just a misunderstanding. That back then they actually thought this was the actual Roman style of art, because of course by that time, I mean, it was the 1500s by that time, all the color, obviously, all the paint fell off from the original monuments, so that they sort of imagined that this is what Roman art really is, and they just adopted it without even thinking about it. And I like that they sort of have this here, that it sort of mirrors the scientific understanding of that time. It's a nice little caption from history, if you will. And yeah, well, again, like I said, now we get into really something that makes you think. I mean, look at this pharaoh and tell me they weren't inspired by Yul Brynner and the Ten Commandments. Like, it's at some points it's really clear where their inspiration came from. Now here we have the great parting, Moses parting the Red Sea and going through with all of his followers, and it shows this. I chose this picture because it's not only the best picture I remember from this book, but I also chose it because to sort of show that it's not all rip-off and it's not all just taking inspiration from something else. This picture is actually unique. And I like the fact that it's one of the few pictures that are actually kind of good, maybe. That you can see that the artist actually put some effort into it, trying to make it look unique, trying to make it look good and detailed. Like at the bottom here, you see this fish, and here's another one, I think. And you see the whole background here. I do kind of like it that in this picture the artist actually put some effort into it. Okay, now we jump a huge way to this. Now we get into Solomon's temple. Now, this is exactly what I was saying. You can see this. What I was saying about drawing influence from movies like The Ten Commandments, from Ben-Hur, hell, even Caligula. Even though Caligula came out a whole 10 years later, it still got anyone who watches who watched it knows they got a lot of monumental sets in this too. And yeah, you can clearly see the inspiration. Like, here. I mean, look at this. Look at how monumental this is supposed to be. And of course, again, it sort of mirrors the understanding of that time. Like, you can clearly, like, at first glance, you're really thinking you're looking at something like a Roman forum or something. Like, it's really supposed to look classic, or at least their understanding of classic. Like, it's very clear that this isn't supposed to be, or it's very clear that the architecture at times doesn't belong. And I know that round arches existed long before the Romans, Like, of course, the Ishtar Gate has a round arch, stuff like that. But, I mean, if you look at this at first glance, now, okay, you can just see this crummy little shot with the webcam. But if you look at this if you look at this yourself in the book, at first glance, you really are thinking that you're looking at something Roman or something. Like your stereotypical classic epic monumental movie set, that it's something like Fritz Lang's Nibelungen, or again like all those monumental movies where the focus is really more substance over style than style over substance, in that they don't pay any real attention to detail. It's just supposed to look monumental and epic, much like this whole piece here. And yeah, but what I really find weird, a second, if you can here at the left, you see Solomon's temple with the two big pillars. And I don't know, it looks really weird because it kind of looks like you're taking something like Notre Dame and splicing it with Romanesque features. Like you clearly have the two pillars that do look like Notre Dame, but you have the round arches, which are clearly Roman or Romanesque. And I kind of find it's kind of weird to look at. But again, it's supposed to mirror maybe the understanding of the time and the influence they drew from movies like Ben-Hur, from Cleopatra, that is supposed to look epic and monumental rather than time-specific. And to some, I actually have to give, at this, seeing this sort of makes me want to give a backhanded compliment to something like The Passion of the Christ, where the movie itself is horrible. It's really fucking stupid and horrible, but at least the sets, when you're looking at the sets, you know you're in that time. They make you believe you're actually in this time. You're actually watching something that takes place in Judea. So I just have to give a little backhanded compliment to Passion of the Christ as opposed to this monstrosity here. And now here I want to get to something that really makes no fucking sense within the context of this this drawing. Now this is the famous scene of King Nebuchadnezzar, where he gets this, where God writes this warning on his wall, the Mene Mene Tekel kind of thing. And in this sense, in this drawing, if you look at this drawing on its own and you see the writing, it's clearly Latin writing. But remember, this Nebuchadnezzar, we're talking about like a Babylonian king. We're not talking about anything Greek or Roman or something like that. So within the context of this drawing, this phrase written in Latin writings makes no goddamn sense, because you wouldn't be able to read it. But I guess they sort of, again, it's supposed to be for kids. It's supposed to be for teens. And of course, if you put this in there in Babylonian cuneiform, of course they wouldn't really understand it. Maybe, which again is kind of fucking stupid, because I guess a 14-year-old would kind of realize that to some degree, that even a 14-year-old would realize that this, in the context of this drawing, of this illustration, makes no sense. So I just wanted to, that's one of the things that sort of stuck out while I was looking through this. Now, as I've already said, I do have to give The Passion of the Christ some backhanded compliment, because they at least have sets that make sense. And, well, speaking of Jesus, that's the big question.